A very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the Air Quality Management lecture series. And today we are going to have 37th lecture. This lecture we started exactly in 3 years back, and this lecture being coordinated by Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Madras, Air Quality Management Association, and CEPHA network. Go to the next slide. So, as a part of this lecture, over a period of time, we started, collaborating, get in touch with, contact with the colleagues who are exclusively working in the area of air quality and related issues. So then we started an Air Quality Management Association a year back, and basically to understand the basic science in promoting the knowledge and what are the best practices that are available to address air quality. And we also look at it in various dimensions, technology, monitoring, and also the policy aspects. So basically, this association also gives a platform for the young researchers to interact with experts. Next. There are a couple of other activities we also started coordinating. There is a quarterly newsletter, Prakriti, which is a part of our activities, so which publishes the articles, and you are most welcome to contribute in Prakriti newsletter. There are some videos which also contribute good messages for the community to address air pollution, solid waste management, and many environmental issues. And many competitions we have conducted over a period of time, and all details are available with the CEPHA network, with the various community activities. And of course, we do also coordinating many conferences. Next. So, very soon you have an opportunity to meet all the experts working in the area of air quality management. We are organizing an 8th Indian International Conference on Air Quality Management. So again, we started about in 2016 very successfully. We are organizing this conference in collaborating with both international and national leading institutes. And this conference will going to held this time at IISA Bangalore from 4 to 8th. We're combining with some winter school, but the conference date is from 6th to 8th. Next. Just to give you some brief idea about this air quality management lecture series. So basically, this will provide an important forum for young researchers, scientists, engineers, educators to work together, and also provides an opportunity for the young researchers to understand what is the latest advancement in the air quality management, and latest technologies and policy aspects will be discussed in various lectures, and of course there will be an opportunity for the collaborations. Next. Next. Next slide. Oh, it's got disconnected. Yeah, these are all the eminent speakers who gave a talk in air quality management lecture series since 2021. Yes, previous lecture was the last month lecture was given by Professor Arvind Kumar Nema, Professor and Head of the Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Delhi. And this lecture uh, will be from Parthaa Bosu, and I'm very glad that he is an very prolific researcher uh, since more than 2 decades. He is working on various issues addressing the air quality, particularly focusing towards the vehicles, which is part of the city dynamics. So now I welcome Mr. Parthaa Basu, and I request Gopika to introduce Parthaa Basu.
Thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to everyone present, and it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for the day, Mr. Parthaa Bosu. He is currently the Executive Director at EPIC India. He previously served as the Lead India Advisor for the Environmental Defence Fund, where he directed the Clean Air Catalyst project aimed at improving air quality in indoor and establishing protocols for managing hyperlocal hotspots in central India. His expertise in the field is unparalleled, having collaborated with IISc Bangalore and Javadpur University to launch IDEA, an open source energy optimization and transition model made in India. With his vast expertise, he has adeptly handled various aspects of environmental management, including atmospheric pollution, government relations, emissions, fundraising, and strategic leadership. His career began at the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, where he played a pivotal role in developing the computerized emission check system for vehicles in India, which is still in use today. He later joined the United Nations Partnership, Clean Air Asia, as the India representative and eventually assumed the role of India Director and South Asia liaison. During his tenure, he established India's first and only green logistic working group with the Ministry of Heavy Industries and the Niti Aayog to reduce emissions and improve flight efficiency. He also created the world's first walkability survey app and launched the India Air Quality Series interactive repository with CSIR, NEERI, and CPCB, which contains India's indigenous air quality studies since 1905. The talk for today is titled Flight and Environment, Challenges, Policies, and Opportunities in India, where he'll be discussing challenges, opportunities, and policy aspects in the Indian context for sustainable flight, focusing on emissions. Sir, we welcome you once again. Please share your screen for the talk.
Thank you, Gopika. Thank you, Professor Shivanagandra. It's a great pleasure to be able to participate in this program. I have been following this program, and this is a great uh, event where I have. Um, I'm sorry, it says that I need to re-log in order to share my screen. So, Professor, I'll have to re-log in. I'm sorry for that.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, please go ahead and just re-log in.
Sure. Is my screen visible to everyone? The presentation?
Yes, visible, but I could not able to see the clear screen. Maybe I don't know whether others. Okay, now it's better. Yes, now it's clear.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Um, Thank you very much, sir, once again for this opportunity to present at this forum. Uh, I am the executive director at Energy Policy Institute of University of Chicago in India, and this topic of working on freight has been an area where we as a country and we as an academic and research community have been trying and striving for a very long period in order to be able to contribute and add value to make it more efficient, faster, economical, at the same time environmentally sustainable. So today, my presentation is going to talk about some of the challenges that we face, what kind of opportunities that lies ahead us, and what kind of policy directions that the government has taken over the course of time, and what other things that can be plugged in. So, can you see my second screen, second slide?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So freight is very important. It is multimodal. We use different kind of freight. Predominantly freight in India that we see in front of us today is road, but there is to be a time when it was rail. And to be the ability to deliver shipments on time to the right destination without damage, loss, at an efficient cost, critical time is very, very important for a good business. As a derivative demand of economic development, freight transport plays a very important role in the economic growth. And in the recent years, many of us might have noticed that the experience that some of the countries show that the freight demand almost is stable, and in few cases it has gone up, and in few cases it has gone down drastically post COVID and along with the GDP growth. It is very um, in, intangible, and it is very closely connected with the growth of the GDP of a country. In this slide, I'm trying to show how it performs. It has been performing in our country, and it is slightly on a higher side. I mean, there are developing nations who have been close to 11 and 12, but the developed nations have been able to achieve 8, 9, 10% of their GDP, which is very, very efficient system. We somehow have been above 13 for a large part of the last 2 decades. We have an aim to become 9%, but the fact is that we have been hovering around 12 to 14% only. Freight, if you see in terms of the road freight, the vehicle ownership pie in the freight is as small as 5%. But it has a very strong connection with both society as well as environment. As you can see, it is responsible for almost a quarter of road accidents that happen annually in the country, and is responsible for nearly or more than 50% of all known pollutants, including PM, CO2, NOx, and is also a solid 30%, 35% contributor to short-lived climate pollutants like black carbon. Uh, Freight, in terms of the heavy-duty trucks, they also consume nearly 76% of the diesel that is being used by the transport sector. So that's a massive big number. And if you see the numbers that is coming from all the big agencies, then it shows that it is only going to increase and get better. And the problem is not the improvement of freight or the increasing in numbers. The problem is the externalities that it brings along with it. As per Niti Aayog, the number of trucks plying on Indian roads and highways is expected to grow, expected to become quadruple from about 4 million currently to about 17 million by 2050, which is a massive number. So I have divided my presentation into the three parts. I will talk about its economical, environmental, and social impact. And at the end, I will talk about how we are trying to revolutionize this. And because it is a very important part of it, and we somehow don't see it just because the trucks operate mostly at night, it is something which we have always missed. When we design the transport policies, our policies are designed for passenger cars, for two-wheelers, but not for uh, the trucks, not for these freight vehicles. When we design heavy duty vehicles planning, we design it for the buses, we design it for intercity transport, but we still do not miss out the trucks and we do not consider it. So somehow they have been uh, always left out. And if you see this, then it's so complicated. The Ministry of Urban Development is responsible for the freight industry who manufactures these trucks. The Ministry of Road Transport is responsible for its running day to day when it comes to um, transportation within the goods and running over the using the roads and the national highways. But again, the parent ministry is not heavy industries or a Ministry of Road Transport. It varies from different places, and that is why when it comes to the freight sector, we see that there is a multiplicity of associations, etc. And because of their fragmented nature, the adequate information about freight policies always remain very much unavailable and unskewed. And it's an unbalanced freight movement and the oversupply in the truck market that is causing a lot of imbalance and a lot of challenges for anybody to make any kind of a dent in the sector, which we will see now. When we look at the economic growth, we see that the overall logistics, as we said, that is about 14% of the GDP, which is significantly higher than many of the other countries responsible for transporting goods. So once upon a time, today we are, transporting nearly 45% or 30% of the goods by rail and rest of them by road. But it used to be a different scenario when it started, when the majority of the goods were being transported using the rail. It is just because the inefficient system of the railway freight management that slowly the shippers moved transporting their goods to the road network, and that has caused a different kind of an externality. But that doesn't mean, and don't think that that makes it sound like the road freight is extremely efficient. The thing where road freight takes advantage is the fact that it is up to a large extent being able to deliver the goods to the doorstep compared to the rail. So that's the reason why there has been a massive shift over the road. But things are changing, and we will see how. As I said, as per the Ministry of Road Transport, our countries, there's a huge number of logistic cost that we are spending today because of the inefficiencies attached to the freight sector. When it comes to the environmental part, we saw that how the freight sector is responsible for a huge amount of emissions, and that is likely so because its job is to haul goods from one section to another, and therefore whether we talk about any of the modes, it is always very heavy in its carbon footprint. Among the different type of vehicles, it is the trucks and lorries, as we know, as I showed in one of the previous slides, that they are responsible for more than 25% of most of the emissions and nearly 50 to 60% of PM emissions. And this is a thumb rule which remains more or less same across the country. Don't think that it is a very different scenario altogether in developed nations. It is just that they have been able to do a modal shift and improve them. So when you look at the PM contributors, then obviously trucks are very heavy, but doesn't mean that inland waterways is very clean. Of course, we are now looking at alternate fuels also for the inland waterways, and Kochi has been one of the front runners who are also already doing trials of electric waterways. But other than that, it's the trucks who are generally higher in most of the CO2 and also at par at NOx when it comes to inland waterways. Rail obviously is much more efficient on the per capita tonnage of goods that it can actually transport between two given points, and that is why it looks more um, efficient. But when it comes to the road freight, and if we translate these into costs, then obviously it looks like not only the things that we know about the tailpipe emissions of this, but also the externalities such as the congestion and infrastructure building that is required also is a massive cost for this for running a efficient freight and logistics system. And translating this environmental and social impacts into economic enables an informed decision that balance economic and environmental factors for a sustainable future, and that is what is very, very important and something that Niti Aayog strives to do. But don't think that it is only how systems efficiency or fuel or technology that plays the role. It is also us as consumers who also play a very important role here. This is just a case study that was studied in Mexico, where they looked at how the express delivery or faster delivery requests has an high emission impact on on this delivery, on this entire freight and logistics. And uh, all our requests of becoming using a prime delivery or a special delivery, being a prime member or something like this, always has an impact. So sometimes it makes it makes a lot of sense for us to consider what is more important and whether it is really important to go for a express delivery for those kind of goods. uh, you saw on the previous slide, I talked about traffic congestion, and traffic congestion is a massive cost. And in fact, there has been very less studies on impact of economic impact of congestions and how it basically translates into money, what kind of losses. And every scenario, every city would have a different congestion pattern, and it would have a different economic value. Imagine a congestion in a city like Mumbai and how much delay and it can cause, and what is the kind of economic losses that can happen due to that. Freight is also has a role in eating into our pedestrian and public space because of their parking space, because of their sheer size, etc. And of course, the environmental and health impacts that come associated along with it. We have seen that although it is a very important part of our daily life as it brings all the bread and butter to our desks, but and it is forecasted to grow. But we also know that with an additional 50% increase in the truck transport, which is forecasted for 2050, the total transport volume is going to rise by nearly 57%, which is massive. And it is only going to add to a massive congestion, which something which we have to plan for. And if we know what kind of cost benefit analysis that is required in order to see whether that is a very tangible outcome that we are seeing, or if there is a different way we should look at that growth to happen and not happen on the road or maybe some other mode, then that needs to be studied and found out. We talked about the pollution aspects largely, and it's very sad that when it comes to the electrification, we have been putting a lot of onus on the two-wheelers and the passenger cars, but actually the bulk of emission actually comes from these heavy-duty trucks. And if we are able to somehow shift the electrification focus to that, then we can actually control a bulk of emissions. Um, there is another part, very big part that is associated with trucks, and that is the accidents. They are responsible for nearly 25 to 28% annual accidents. on Indian roads. This is MOTH data actually. And these costs that we have calculated. These are the cost that is in terms of the losses, in terms of the government cost, the process cost. But what about the family who are impacted? What is the kind of loss that happens? Many cases, it's the men who are the breadwinners, and when there is a loss attached to it, then the significance of that spreads into the family in a different proportion. This is more or less about how we look at freight and how we have been looking at freight. But there is one thing that is super important, and that is that in the last decade or so, India has seen a massive logistic revolution which we have never seen before. And I thought that it is very important for us to talk about that briefly. And you see, India is also, there is a large amount of homegrown producers of product which we are exporting. There is a made in India, make in India push. There is a PM Gati Shakti push. So all put together, it is the logistics supply chain, which is this sector, which is going to grow massively in the coming, it has grown massively, and it's going to grow at least 3 to 4 times bigger in the coming 10 years. So in case if you are into shares and all that, then you should look at investing in such kind of sectors now. But there is an important concept, and that is about the green logistics, the green freight. So Gopika, when she was introducing me, she talked about that I had set up a body of Green Freight India, a working group along with the Niti Aayog and Minister of Heavy Industries in 2015, 2016. And the importance is that every time there has been a policy push in the logistics sector, and we will talk about it how, it has been more on making it efficient from an economic perspective. But it is important that we also look at it from an environmental perspective, given that we have a net zero ambition and we have net zero goals to meet. And it is a very essential sector, because it connects different actors in the value chain, from raw material suppliers to producers to the consumers. The latter can be identified as one of the most important elements of logistics. It is therefore important for us to first measure the impact of transport sector from an ecological, social, and economic point of view, then define the appropriate measure, which is a measure of reduction that we should look at it. In the previous slide, when I was talking about road safety, I talked about how men are generally the breadwinners, and therefore when there is an accident, it has a very high impact in the overall family. But we should also know that the logistics in general has been a very male dominated sector, and overall in the whole world we do not see more than 9% females in logistics sector. But I should tell you that this 9% also grew from almost 3 or 4% in the last decade in the whole world. And India has contributed to this sector by becoming almost from 0 to 2% females in the logistics sector. I know we are talking about nothing, and it's a very small number, but all I'm saying is that there is a revolution that is happening, and women are not behind, they are also a part of it. In fact, many of the logistic planners and supply chain planners, apparently in the big four companies that they are coming, they're also women. So it's really excellent. It was noticed in that Green Freight working group, one of the meetings, that there is a shortage of truck drivers in the country. Now, why there is a shortage of truck drivers in the country? The shortage is not only because there are less number of drivers who are trained, or there are less number of drivers who want their children to be drivers. Of course, that is a very big factor, but there is also a massive loss of life because of the accident where the driver themselves are affected or impacted. It's not always that it's the driver responsible for causing harm to the others. So in those kind of scenarios, that there is a fear among the drivers that this job is very risky. And when it was studied that why it is risky, it was basically it was found that basically trying to do more number of hours was one of the factors, and the inhuman working conditions of which are becoming one of the massive causes. So now the new transport companies, they are doing a driver rolling system, and what they are trying to do is they are creating resting areas for drivers in which they are changing the drivers every 300 or 400 kilometers. So roughly about 8 hours, the truck is running almost constantly, but every 8 hours there is an intersection point, resting area, where there is a new driver and new conductor or an assistant driver who basically takes over the truck and goes from there. But there is a very big but here. Uh, this is only possible where the fleet is owned by the shipper. In India, 80% of the fleets are owned by, so 80% of the trucks are owned by single owners. So it's the driver owner system that India mostly has. The shippers are very less. In fact, it used to be 95% single owner drivers till about a decade back, till about 2015. In the last 8-9 years, it has grown quite a lot, and we are seeing a lot of big shippers coming in and fleet owners coming in. So there is a lot of investment under CSR which is happening in order to provide safer roads and safer conditions for the drivers to work on. And one of the areas which we have somehow missed every time in the country, even though all our goods or 80% of the goods that at least in the room that we are talking at the moment, we all are receiving through the e-commerce industry. And urban logistics is one of the most central keyword in relation to the movement of goods, which describes basically the transport of goods in the urban areas, the cities where we live. And this refers to all the movements within a city district, both in terms of supplying end customers and in terms of supplying retail industries or the chains and other trades. And we have seen that the last mile of this, there has been a pickup in terms of electrification. But even though, let me tell you that that part has not been very, very significant. In places like Delhi, we do see some amount of electric rickshaws and the tricycles as in the picture, which is basically delivering the last mile of the goods, but somehow it is still not 100%. And it is very easy to do 100% given that the small amount of kilometers that they have to travel. It is so urban freight from that perspective is very well known, both in terms of congestion and therefore air pollution, and also in terms of intrusion in the public spaces. They are parked in various areas. So a lot of NGOs who work on with public places, they have been complaining about walkability and limited space. Most of the deliveries will happen in the office times, and the truck will be stopping in front of a shop transporting goods. So all these factors have been only increasing, and somehow these policies have been missing. This is some of the externalities of the massive revolution that we are seeing. But as I said, the freight electrification has been a challenge, and it is much easier said than done. The US has looked at the big freight, big truck electrification in a big way. But even then, just think of a look at a small charging station in your neighborhood parking place and just see how many cars are being charged over there. And then just imagine if you are to charge your trucks over there, then amount of space and the negotiation of that big vehicle that needs to happen to that charging station, and how many charging stations can you set up. And we are talking about 6 to 8 to 12 hours of charging. There are superchargers, but then how many superchargers do we see how commonly? We have been doing excellent on the startups. Uh, the push that this government has been given on the startup development has been just phenomenal, and that has resulted in so many new players in the last decade. In fact, I will say that these are not all. There are many more who are there and who are doing excellent, providing excellent service in this logistics space, trying to simplify and make it much more efficient. And they have been raising a lot of funds in order to see what kind of gaps are there in the existing logistics system and how they can make it more efficient, more safer, more user friendly, and more trackable with the help of new systems. Government of India has also done a massive push to this sector, and this is the inland waterway sector. In fact, it has been such beautifully executed that this 200 million tons that we have been doing uh, is only going to we have been doing for past 2 3 years. In fact, we are doing about 150 160 million tons, and it is expected to become 200 million ton by the end of 2030 or maybe 2030. But by 2047 or so, we are expected to touch 500 million tons, which is a massive number. And we have seen that for example, Bangladesh, if you see, the Bangladesh actually has a very good inland waterways freight system, but it is still small and they are doing more of passenger. But India is doing freight, and it is, which is fantastic. Laos, Cambodia are few of the nations who are doing very good inland waterways planning. Um, in fact, Kazakhstan, out of all countries, have been to reduce their logistic costs, has targeted investment in inland waterways and railway tracks in many parts of the country. So countries are looking at new kind of revolutionary changes. It is also felt that inland waterways have been efficient in much way. Probably the amount of power that is required to move them have been better, much more efficient compared to on the road. Secondly, is that initially when we started the inland waterways, the kind of engines that were put on these kind of vehicles were many of them were jugars, many of them were old. Jugars are basically the makeshift homegrown vehicles, not tested. Now there is a full mechanism, there is a testing mechanism, etc., and we are also getting buying new ships, etc., to provide this kind of inland waterways. And we have a vast network of inland waterways, nearly about 18 to 20,000 kilometers of rivers, canals. In Kerala, we have backwaters, and we hold a massive potential to usher a new era of transportation for both passengers and cargo alike. And as I was saying, that Kochi, if you go, you will already find some electric ferries which are transporting people and some of the goods. Railways has not been far behind. In fact, railways have been looking at a mission 100% electrification. They have been looking at a huge number of electrification. They have electrified a large number of broad gauge tracks in the last 4 to 5 years, and it is only going to increase further. They are pushing, and with the dedicated freight corridors and etc., there is a massive number that is going to increase in this sector. So as I was saying, that the freight sector did not have any kind of a MyBop, as we say. There is a plethora of government bodies. There is Ministry of Heavy Industries, Ministry of Urban Development, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, and but there was no one, and Ministry of and various other ministries, but no one has been pivotally looking at them. But now there is a Department of Logistics, which has been created under the Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce, and that is looking at freight and freight efficiency. But as I said before, that they are essentially looking at freight efficiency in order to make it much more efficient. And in 2016-17, this was set up. 2015 onwards, the discussion started during the working group setup, which I had done. 2017, finally, it was set up. And let me tell you that this has been very, very instrumental in most of the policies and the changes that we saw under this revolution section. The vehicle scrappage policy also ensured that we get new trucks, efficient trucks, BS6 trucks, more on the road, because you see, trucks are difficult compared to vehicles in terms of enforcement and implementation. From that perspective, it has been very good, and it has been able to put in new technology and cleaner trucks, more efficient trucks on the streets, on the roads, on the highways, and which has been actually helping both in terms of emissions, fuel efficiency, etc. Last year, we also launched the new logistic policy, and this was to complement the PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan. And the National Logistics Policy was basically trying to look at how digitization can become a part of the logistic industry to make it much more secure, easy, and as well as trackable. They are also looking at designing unified logistic interface platforms, which is fantastic, which is basically means it can be train, truck, as well as urban freight all put together, and in few cases, if there are ports, then ports as well. Ease of business, under the ease of business, ease of logistics is also something that the government has been pushing, and they are now looking at actually skilling of people. So the government is very, very gung-ho about skilling people, about creating a huge employment base for this new logistics sector, in order to provide not only an efficient logistic system into the country, but also to provide logistic as a service. So this is the emissions thing. Now, this is very interesting because it basically shows how the emissions from the freight sector is going down and is likely to go down. I will share this. This is a EASA calculation in which it is trying to show that every time there has been a policy change, it has impacted in reduction of emissions from the trucks within the transport sector. And this is one of the papers that Professor Shiva Nagendra and his team wrote on the trend analysis of the criteria pollutants in megacity, which also talks about how the PM10 contribution has been reducing. But again, something which we have to remember, the scrappage policies, the BS norms, the auto fuel policy, and the new BS quality fuel across the country, they all have an impact. New technology trucks, better technology tires, silicon tires, 20% silicon tires, 30% silicon tires. So there has been a lot of push at the government level. So from that perspective, this has been massive. The picture that is there in front of you is a train called Super Vasuki. So as I was saying, that Indian Railways have been electrifying, and they have made remarkable progress on this freight side. From August 2023, they have successfully launched and achieved a total freight loading of about 634 million tons, which is a big jump from the previous year. The revenue they have generated reached approximately 1 lakh crore. The Super Vasuki train that you see it is India's longest loaded train, stretching about 3.5 kilometers. It runs with about 6 locomotives, 295 wagons or cars, as we call them. During its trial run, the Super Vasuki carried a total trailing load of 27,000 tons of coal, which is almost enough to power a 3,000 megawatt power plant for a day at least. So, yes, the revolution is on. As I said, that it is now 65% road. It used to be 70% till about a year or 2 years back. It has become 65. Rail is gaining, but also gaining that 0.5%, which used to be zero or non-existent, is the waterways. And it is cheaper to actually transport by waterways, and that is why I feel that the waterways is going to be very efficient mode of transport and is going to be very popular in the coming years. So we talked about road, we talked about rail, we talked about the policies, and we talked about waterways, but the National Highways Authority or the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways are not far. In fact, they have been doing a massive push in building better and more efficient and broader highways across the country. We all have heard the stories of it being exemplary and record building some 35 kilometers per day rate or something like that. So which is really massive. And they are, as you know, that there are these ports coming up, and Mundra is already operating now. There are new ports coming up. So what they are trying to do is that they're trying to connect it with the rail. So that is why I talked about that multi modal logistic platforms which they are creating, and they want everything to be connected so that it becomes much more efficient. Earlier there used to be just two pockets. One was Chennai and one was up north, sorry, in Maharashtra, and connecting with the north. And these were predominantly used by the automobile industry. So is overall everything that we are doing, is it resulting in something? Well, yes. So commercial vehicle sales have gone up, which is basically a sort of testament that there is more need, there is more efficiency. And even then we saw that the number of trucks on the road has reduced to 65%, which basically means that even then there are large number of commercial vehicles being sold because of more demand, more better fuel efficiency, better technology, better usage, better opportunities. But even then they are, the whole overall truck the road freight number is reducing. So where does it lead us? It leads us to a superb ranking growth by India. So there is something called the World Bank's Logistic Performance Index. And we have seen that how the government has been pushing for a even better logistic performance. So we jumped about 16 spaces, and from 54 in 2014, we have become 38. And to be very honest, with the way you saw the last 10 slides and with the way all of these things are going, I somehow look at it becoming 24 at least in the coming years, 2 years, 3 years. And this is of course with the government policies of Gati Shakti, etc. And what does it do to us? Well, we get to have better products being manufactured in the country, and overall logistic becomes an integral part in making sure that we have such kind of shippers and manufacturers coming to the country. And it's basically the revitalization effort that India sort of aims to bring more into the manufacturing onshore products and increase the number of sectors in which we can competitively produce with better supply chain, better logistics, more efficient technologies, and looking at newer sectors, and something like energy, pharmaceuticals has been a big push, and also the financial services. So I guess we are catching up in a big way, and we are catching up so that we can be big and efficient as our competitors. I will stop here and thank you very much. And I look forward to any questions that may be there.
Partha, thank you very much for the very nice lecture, and you have covered the different aspect. I was also not aware of it many things about this freight, and in fact, it is the one which contributes more pollution. Yeah, thank you very much. So
You're
before
welcome, sir.
we take up this question, we will just give us some break to you. So we'll just ask all the participants to start their camera, and then we'll have a one group photo. Then we'll start looking into the answering the questions. Gopika, you will able to take? Gopika or Ashwin? Okay, Ashwin is taking it. Huh? Okay.
Yes, sir, take it, sir.
Taken? Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. So just to start the discussion, Partha, you just mentioned about, in fact, you have covered, and there is a more and more, shift happens from our conventional road transport to maybe the waterways and airways. So as a result, in terms of the 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 emissions, and particularly I'm trying to look at it. So emissions means we are only looking at from the earlier tailpipe emissions, but it also lead to brake wear, tire wear, and also the resuspended dust contributed by the vehicle's movement. So
Absolutely.
how are we see that these aspect will reduce? For example, is there any way we can quantify per passenger this can be reduced, or per ton of good transport this much amount can be reduced?
Right. So the way I look at it is that the freight sector uh, is, as you said, it is not only the tailpipe, it is also the external factors like it's the rubber tires, the wear and tear of the tires, the brake paddles, the clutch paddles, the resuspension of dust, the wear and tear of the road, uh, a- and also the congestion that it adds the moment it is passing through any urban area. Um, and the way I look at it is the timing of the freight has been a very big, uh, whoever invented the time policy of no entries, etc., in the urban areas uh, has been a very big blessing to the cities in a large extent. But also to leave it on the table is we do realize that many a times, in fact, we have seen that in Delhi, there has been many studies which basically shows that because of their nighttime movements, although the emissions are likely to be low because of no congestion almost, but there is there is a because of the change in climatic conditions during the night, there is a higher chance that the mixing height and the ventilation coefficients will be much lower, and any emission that is caused by the trucks also remains suspended on those part of the city for a larger period in the early mornings. But I guess, sir, it is also the technology part which has been contributing largely on it. Policies such as the scrappage policy, although I'm not a very big fan of it, but I think that they are able to push newer technologies on the road at least. So, although there is a big jump in terms of cost from a BS6 truck, a BS4 truck to a BS6 truck, but only thing is that the BS6 trucks are nearly 25 to 40% more efficient to it compared to its predecessors. So from that perspective, maybe there has been some improvements.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And other question which is there in my mind is, for example, this the emissions contributed by these diesel vehicles, and generally they will say the 15-year vehicles are banned because their contributions will be much higher. But again, these vehicles will be go and play not in the cities, but they may start playing in rural areas where the regulations may be not very stringent. So how do we look at it? Whether we are shifting the pollutants? So I'm just trying to see if the one way the policy interventions will try to, move from the higher pollution to the lower pollution. Maybe that will influencing somewhere where there is a lower pollution. Again, it is increasing to the higher pollution.
Right. Sir, can I give you two aspects to it, sir?
Sure.
See, sir, first of all, we have to understand that uh, there is no thumb rule for a deterioration factor of a vehicular engine. There is no such rule which basically says a vehicle's engine will be life or deterioration will be over in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or 25 years. Uh, we have seen several studies, and in several studies, there is a change. So, a lot depends on the inspection and maintenance of these vehicles during their operation time. There is also a very big factor is adulteration of fuel. Why I'm saying this is because adulteration of fuel impacts the life of the catalytic converter that is attached in the BS6 vehicles. So if there is a chance that the vehicle has been exposed to adulterated fuel, then there is a very big chance that the catalytic converter is not on 100%, definitely. And there is a chance of high emissions. Now comes to the part of the policy. Now, yes, in order to shift a vehicle, the vehicle cannot ply within the city limits once it is 15 years, but it can ply on the periphery. That really doesn't help much. And we are just shifting the pollution from one place to another. Rather, the fleet replacement policies, which has been working in terms of the scrappage policies, etc., the fleet renewal policies have been much more helpful.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. There is one question I think Dr. Madhusudan has asked. Impact is due to overloading is common and its effects are visible to the air pollution. What is your suggestion as a policy influencer to fleet owners to regulate these kind of emissions?
Right. So there is something called so the vehicle weight earlier used to be done at the checkpoints. That was when the vehicle weights were earlier measured. Now we have moving vehicle weight measurement where the weights are being done at on the pass. Lekin, I still do not agree that that is a very good solution to this kind of a problem. I think the solution lies more on the fact that till the time the driver. So let's understand also at what level does this happen. So generally, if we are talking about manufacturers using fleet owners or a shipper for transporting their goods, then it is not the manufacturers who are basically into this practice. It is being done by the truckers themselves. So why do the truckers do that? So truckers generally do that for extra money, but they also do that because they are not aware of its impact on the vehicles. You are talking about emissions, but I will go a step further and say that it also impacts the vehicle load carrying capacity, can lead to severe accidents also. So emissions is definitely because a vehicle is tested as per load, and it is the Indian driving cycle is on a unladen body and with certain amount of load. So obviously when it is much more than that, then the emissions are going to go up. But they should also be concerned about safety. So I think there are two aspects. One is the social aspect, where I want to really focus on that, because if the driver is doing it for even after knowing the risks of both penalty as well as life, and is still being a part of this practice because of extra money, then we have to find a different way of economically benefiting him so that they don't get into that practice. But the other part is definitely more on the enforcement.
Okay, so there is another question. So
So
the electrification freight, since we generate around 75% of the electricity from the thermal power plants, then how sustainable will it be from air pollution viewpoint? Say, for example, I mean, we are all talking about electrification, and generally, most
right.
of the electricity is coming from coal.
Right, right. Yes, absolutely. So, first of all, it's a very good question. I completely agree with this question. Uh, okay, so there are two parts to it. One part is that the vehicle. So, one is that our renewable energy push has been massive. We have moved from almost nothing to nearly 400 megawatts. So that is, first of all, that is a reality that we can't say no to. Number one. Number two is that there is already a plan to create charging stations which are on renewables. So basically, where the charging station is not on the grid, creating a standalone charging station with its own power source. That has been also a part of the plan. Which are basically that it will be managed, and it will be on a BOT basis, build, operate, transfer. And the government is thinking that if it can actually generate and produce that kind of power in order to charge X number of vehicles. But having said that, there was recently a study by Professor Ashutosh, IIT Kanpur, which basically talks about that electric vehicles may not be very efficient as we think, because of exactly this argument, and also its life cycle analysis of a electric vehicle. So I completely buy this point. I would not like to say that this is going to be a very easy thing. Electrification also does not reduce congestion. So we here, since we are talking only from an air pollution perspective, we might be happy with it's something like this, like a person who thinks from an air pollution lens only thinks about air pollution, but does not think about how an urban planner will see it, because for him the congestion is still there. So I think its time is running out, and we probably can't see things from only one lens. We have to see it from multiple lens just to be more holistic. And I completely agree with this question that majority of the power is still thermal. So we have to be very careful about our electrification ambitions.
Okay, so then what do you think? So whether government can initiate some policies to solar, encouraging solar and wind, or hybriding both, uh, wherever there is an area where those kind of sources can be tapped to give, to meet the this charging point requirement?
My suggestion would be that, sir, solar power should be decentralized, uh, because it's again, we have seen a massive progress in last 10 years because other communities joined hand with the governments. The academia joined hand with the government, the startup community joined hands with the government, people joined hand with the government. So I'm saying that why should, in that case, the electrification or the solarization journey be only the government's forte, and we should not be a part of it. So decentralization should is an opportunity for common citizens to be a part of that movement, and I think decentralization is the answer. So if we are moving at charging stations in many areas, which we should, then we should have them decentralized, having its own power, and that is when electrification will make a true sense.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. There's one other question. So I also thinking like this Saket works in the area of real world emission measurement, and he also measured several heavy duty vehicles. So if there is a different alternate fuels, like one is electrification, but if somebody use biofuel or ultra utilization of hydrogen fuel to heavy duty vehicles, and other construction vehicles, uh, will that make some positive change into the air quality?
Um, Sir, every fuel has some or other kind of impact. Um, I feel that diesel uh, has a massive problem of PM, but is calorifically much more powerful, right? Petrol has a CO2 issue. Uh, CNG has a NOx issue and a methane issue. Hydrogen itself, when leaked, is no longer green. So during a refueling stage or a fueling stage, when hydrogen is, if it leaks, then other than the hazard part, then there is also a massive issue of it being a climate impact. I think we have to understand that whether it makes sense to have a balance of fuels, an ultimate fuel mix, which basically generates X amount of pollutants to the air, and which naturally can be managed. Because if you see, sir, any particular fuel, if you put, there is some kind of a generation, and we are not very clear about that generation somehow, I feel. Hydrogen is great when it comes to manufacturing, and when it comes to manufacturing hydrogen right at the site, and transportation is not involved. But if it is transported, then I do not know, then there is a big question of safety, big question of fueling, refueling, and it's escaping into the atmosphere and impacting the climate.
Yeah. Thank you. I think uh, you are right that safety issues will be one such aspect whenever we are dealing with alternate fuel. Looking from you have a vast experience with the policy, and the one challenge with policy is stakeholder engagement, and particularly when you try to look at it from the air pollution point of view. So everybody is a stakeholder. So how do you see that, or your experience with working with the government, working with an industry, working with community? How do we see possibility of implementing certain policies in a more effective and efficient manner?
Sir, I think you will agree on one thing, that in last 20 years we have seen a massive change in the perception of air pollution and the priority of air pollution. There was a time when air pollution was not entertained as a discussion topic at offices, but today the government is really concerned. It is discussing with the think tanks, academia, research communities, and also asking the business and commercial entities to actually participate and partner them by reducing their manufacturing emissions, stack emissions, etc. Now, from that perspective, I think we have come a big way. But the way I look at it is our next big challenge will be that uh, how can we convince government to move towards minimalist but more conscious expenditures. I will try to explain what I'm trying to say. Um, Having massive investments done on public infrastructure, which may not be looking at next 50 years, is something where we have to do the life cycle emission cost analysis of those. The If we are investing in something like a smoke tower, then I think we have to understand that. So we have come to that level that we understand the importance of air pollution, and thereby we are talking about smoke tower as a solution. But it is also our overzealousness, which is probably sometimes is not allowing us to take a step back and think that, oh, it is an expensive technology, and whether there is a cost benefit analysis when it comes to what comes out of it after installing it, and should I be spending that money into something else where the generation itself can be stopped, the emission contribution, the generation can be controlled. So I think from that perspective we have to think. But I think we have come in a very fantastic move when it comes to air pollution today. The PM is looking at air pollution today. The country chief ministers, they are not only looking at Swachh Bharat, but they are looking at Swachh Vayu. So I think from that perspective, we have made a massive progress. We just have to be listening to the researchers and the academia more so that we make our investments in the right direction.
Okay, yeah, that brings my another question for you. How do we look at it? See, the in every aspect we always more emphasis towards economics. So I know that since we call air pollution, water pollution, or any pollution, it's a waste. So it's a kind of uh, the purpose is done. After that, these things are coming as a waste. For example, you want to move from one place to the other place through your vehicle, then the fuel being burnt for that purpose. So the air pollution is nowhere there from moving from location A to location B, but it causes a lot of damage not only to the environment, for public, even for the materials, and even of course the climate change. So how do you how do we change this in terms of bringing it, how do we make the pollution is also a part of economics?
I think the most important thing is that if we look at, first of all, the gross polluters, and because obviously when the policies are designed, they are mostly designed from the gross polluters perspective, or gross anything which is more majoritarian. And from that perspective, I think it will make a lot of sense if somehow we are able to bring in the manufacturing sector under a regime of market pollution markets, where we are able to tell them that. So there is a problem which I see with our penalty system. Our penalty system is a little archaic, and that leaves very less. If there is a penalty also, then um, the manufacturers are more or less not very concerned with that penalty amount or figure. And I think as a country we should not look at punitive actions. Rather, we should look at more economic penalties. And when we look at economic penalties, since they are not substantial, somehow they have been able to not encourage the manufacturing sector to move towards more sustainable manufacturing. And I think if you look at the cap and trade system, which the US developed decades back to create a market for the pollution, and to say that if you want to pollute, then you have to pay a huge amount of money. And only when you are able to show progress in your control of emissions, then your taxes come down and you can trade with another fellow person in order to buy that. So if you are unable to really control your emissions because of the product that you are manufacturing or something like that, then probably it will be better that you take help from your fellow manufacturer and do a trade agreement where the emission is traded. So from a government perspective, earlier it was 100 and it was 100 plus 80 and it was 180 coming from 2 units. But then 1 unit is able to control its emission below 50 and is able to trade another 50 with the others. So in that case, there is a total emission that is reduced from 180 to say 120 or 130. So from that level, and then it starts looking at tightening the noose and reducing the standards every 1 year, 2 years in order to make them meet their standards. But having said that, for a country like ours where our SEMS data is not yet gold standard, it becomes a very big challenge. So for us, I think what you are asking is absolutely the kind of direction, because we have to find ways to partner, bring everybody into the game. People cannot be aloof and the government has to be left to the hard work. That's not possible. So in order to bring the private sector, manufacturing sector into the game, I think this is a good step. But this also means that we have to make a level playing field by having a good gold quality SEMS data and whatever comes out of the stack.
Thank you very much, Parthaa Bosu. It is excellent that your vast experience working with freight and also, looking the air pollution issues associated with the freight, and you have covered wonderfully with how the logistic systems in the country is changing, and it is a change in association with the rest of the world. And you showed very nicely how things are influencing. We are only looking at in terms of the economic aspect, but you also brought in that, how the gender and also the specific in terms of the emissions contributed by the freight, and how the particularly the emission checking aspect is became a key in terms of addressing this. I think you have brought some new dimensions to understand the issues associated with the freight economics and pollution. And on behalf of Air Quality Management lecture series, I would like to thank you for your time, for giving this wonderful talk. And I also would like to thank all the participants attending this particular lecture series. With their support, it is going nice, and we could able to see that each lecture series we are finding some new members coming and showing their interest, and hope that they will all become an expert in addressing the air pollution issues of the country. I also thank several of my students, because they are all work in a last minute, and whenever there is such issues are coming up, these are all kind of and their extra work in order to support this air quality management lecture series. So thank you all, and see you all in the next month air quality management lecture series. And I also request all of you to consider attending this Indian International Conference on Air Quality Management, which will going to held in ISA Bangalore during 6th to 8th of December 2023. Thank you very much. Thank you, Parth.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.